This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and this is the Meikle Toir, the original. And the Meikle Toir line is finally a range of whiskeys from GlenAllachie that were entirely distilled, created during the current Billy Walker regime. It only has a 5-year age statement, and it's peated. Let's get into it. My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here, with you, on Whiskey Whereabouts. So Meikle Toir means the Great Pursuit, and it's the alternate branding for peated GlenAllachie, like Bruichladdich, Port Charlotte. And they didn't just launch with one edition, they launched with 3 sort of official bottlings in this 5-year age statement category, and then a limited. So there's the original, there's a sherry, there's the chinkapin, and then there was a limited turbo. And while that one was pretty well reviewed, I never saw it on shelves here in the US, and I'm afraid it has come and gone already. So today we're talking about the original, and the casks on this one are bourbon casks, virgin oak, and rye casks. And we've got a 50% ABV bottling here. So this is the first official line of sort of bottlings, 5-year age statement. The handover happened back in 2017, so we've had enough time now that we actually have GlenAllachie produced whiskey that has gone through its entire sort of process under the supervision of the current regime. So let's talk about the peat. It is mainland peat. It is from St. Fergus. It is from the northeastern part of Scotland, north of Aberdeen, and it is described as being sweeter than what we think of when we think of Islay peat. And we've got 2 metrics here. A lot of times we talk about ppm and how does it really matter, because we measure the ppm on the barley before it goes through the process, and the ppm on this is described as, I think, between 80 and 90 on the barley, but they're giving us a number on the spirit and saying it's 35 ppm on the spirit. And the thing about whiskey that has come out of the GlenAllachie distillery since the new ownership is that it is partly the product of this long fermentation that they've implemented, right? It's like 160 hours, and we expect a long fermentation to have lots of esters are going to be released. We're going to get a fruitiness, but there's a video that's on YouTube. It's sponsored by GlenAllachie. It's Billy Walker and the assistant blender, and they're sort of introducing this line and talking about each of the versions. And I don't put too much stock in this type of sort of promotional videos, or especially when they're talking about tasting notes and this type of stuff. But here they seem to be kind of discussing what the different steps going into the process of making the whiskey was, and what their goals, what they at least intended to accomplish. And when they talk about the long fermentation, Billy Walker is on the video and he's talking about how having that long fermentation is going to prevent any sort of solids from bubbling over, and it's going to prevent anything getting burnt or creating off tastes as we move into the next phase of the process, which is part of the thinking kind of behind that approach, according to what they are sort of presenting in their materials. The other thing he talks about when he talks about a 5-year whiskey is that he believes the sweet spot for peated whiskey is between 5 and 8 years. And after the 8 years, the phenols are going to change. So they've led with this peated version, obviously to have a young 5-year age statement on the market, but because of how the peat is going to impact the maturation of the whiskey, going at the sort of younger end of that range. A little bit unusual on this, the original cask configuration with that virgin oak, which we see a lot pop up in the sort of cask configurations with GlenAllachie, right? And the rye casks. And in the discussion, talking on this video about what their goals were with this whiskey, they talk about the purpose of those casks bringing in spice, bringing in a cinnamon, bringing in a ginger. So we're gonna see as I taste this whiskey how much of that is evident as I go in neat on the Meikle Toir 5-year original. Okay, so the first thing I'm getting is salty, not sea brine peat, salty and a toasted nuttiness right up front. There's sweetness, and to me it's marshmallow. Not necessarily campfire marshmallow, but marshmallow. Yeah, and you know, I've obviously been prompted here, hearing them talk about it, but if I lean in, there's definitely cinnamon. But it's a sweet, bakey cinnamon, like cinnamon shaken out over whipped cream. Yeah, the longer I sit with this, I get a lime, a sweet but kind of clean citrus fruit at the bottom of the nose. Pretty inviting. Haven't really talked about smokiness. There is a smoky quality, but it is in the background, and it's like a faint, like trace smoke. The fire has been out for a while, and you've sort of come upon it, and it's just lingering ghost of fire smoke. Let's check it out on the palate. So yeah, it has a real creamy mouthfeel. It's 50% whiskey. It's not hot. It wasn't hot on the nose. It's not on the palate. It's a big step up with the smoke now. It's campfire, kind of ashy smoke. It's not medicinal at all. They're talking about the peat being sweeter, and I'm getting just the sort of fire, the smoke, without any of the sort of brininess, the medicinal from like the Islay peat, but there's lots of sweetness. So is that all part of the whole? It's not clear to me on the palate here. Very chocolate. I'm getting a lot of that just sort of rich, sweet, more milk chocolate than dark chocolate is really present, wrapped around everything. The longer you kind of hold on to it, you get a little bit of a coffee ground bitter. We've got virgin oak casks in here, but it's really in check. If that's where that's coming from. Going back now on the finish neat. Okay, so on the finish is the first time you really feel the ABV. It's still not hot. It's not like I have anything sort of really warm here, anything kind of overpowering, but you can appreciate that you got a little bit higher ABV here at the 50% here on the finish. It's very sweet. Comes in with a big sort of chocolate vanilla swirl. And then you've got the smoke, nice plume of the smoke hovering over that sweetness. Then a real sort of, then the spices. Rich cinnamon now on that finish. This sort of cascade as the finish kind of plays out. It's a decently long finish, and I'm getting that cinnamon chased by like a ginger, you know, something sort of rich, something a little cleaner. And as it fades, very sweet still, with just a dusting of that sort of coffee kind of ground bitter. Again, really well balanced. Okay, so this bottle has been open for a little over a week. You can see the level. I've been sort of dipping into it, and the neck pour was a little bit tighter. Having it open a little bit has opened up some of the richer sort of elements. It was more vanilla, more citrus. Now, much more with the spice. The ginger, especially the cinnamon, the chocolate-rich sweetness has emerged with a little bit of time. Adding water has brought out a little bit of that, and also I think some of the fruitiness as I have experimented with it. Checking that level there. I'm gonna give it a nice little addition of water, come back and check out what has changed. That marshmallow sweet is now like salty caramel, rich, sweet. There is a nuttiness, chocolate covered nut now. Still at the bottom of this nose, I'm still getting that really fresh, clean, sweet lime citrus. It's a really nice note to offset all this rich sweetness on the nose. Let me check out the palate here with the water really quick. Chocolate mocha latte now. It's cream, it's chocolate, there's some coffee bitter, it's all mixed up. It's pretty balanced, except instead of a spice garnish across the top, it's a little bit of campfire ash across the top of it. Very rich. Mouthfeel is not quite as good, but it's not washed out. It's stood up to the water pretty well on the palate. On the finish, biggest difference here with the water. I'm getting more fruit now on that finish. Berry fruit, rich, not tart, but not sweet. Rich, dark, berry, with those other elements again. A little bit of that chocolate, plenty of that sort of casky kind of tannic bitter coffee ground kind of vibe with that sort of mocha coffee kind of sweet along the sides. Okay, so the obvious comparison here is the Wee Beastie, right? The 5-year core range peated whiskey, but this is not the Speyside Wee Beastie. These are completely different whiskeys. They're doing completely different things. This is all barbecue meat and Isla peat. This is this sort of rich, sweet spice, a little bit of fruit with that sort of complementary peat smoke going with it. This is 47.4%, so it's a little bit heightened ABV. We've got the 50 here. It does not present as any hotter than this. They found a really nice balance, a nice sweet spot here with the richness from the ABV without coming off as hot or overpowering all those flavors that they have apparently worked really hard to cultivate in this whiskey. I think this is every bit the equal of the Wee Beastie, a very solid whiskey. So I'm gonna say 4 glasses, the same sort of rating that I gave this bottle. In the case of this one, if you can tell, it's a little bit smaller because it's a 700 ml bottle. This is not a 750 US ml size bottle, and I paid over $70 for my bottle of the Meikle Toir, which is a little much, but I will say 50%, and I've seen it in a lot of places less than 70, in the 60 sort of dollar range. And with that heightened ABV, I think maybe I paid a little bit more sort of early adopter kind of tax. I think it's probably priced where it needs to be given the quality here. So I'm not going to dock it on the price, and I'm going to say final rating is 4 glasses on the Meikle Toir. So let me know in the comments which of these Meikle Tours you've had and which one you think is best. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. There's a big button popping up right over here that you can use. We're coming up very quickly on the 2,000 subscriber mark, and I'm gonna have a nice comparison video with a couple of Lagavulins. I'm gonna say they have age statements. I'm gonna say they're more than 50% ABV, and I'm going to say they have some maturation in tequila and mezcal casks. So what do you think is coming? Put your predictions in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe so we can get to that mark, and I will have that special episode for you. Until then, I will see you on the next one.